So tonight, our special guest is John Lewis. From his bio, I will read directly. John earned a PhD in statistics from The Ohio State University in 2014. 2014, so that's less than 10 years ago. All right, that's good. All right, and I'm unopinionated whether that'd be good or bad, so I'm just going to say it's good because it's just a fact. He then held a research statistician position at is it Sandia?
Yep.
All right, Sandia National Laboratories for 5 years, where we worked on various applications related to national defense and published papers in several areas, including inverse prediction, spatial statistics, and functional data analysis. I'm using a little bit of my voice there for you, Katie. All right, he joined Upstart in August 2019, where he does work to improve underwriting process for personal and auto loans. So in case you don't know, Upstart is an organization whose mission is to enable effortless credit-based true risk. John's going to discuss how they tackle his mission every day from a machine learning perspective. Going to cover goals of underwriting, because I know we love that subject here, and the use of non-traditional variables, the challenges of making accurate predictions of future behavior. We've all seen movies like that, and Upstart's effort to ensure their models are fair and comply with regulatory standards. So the format for tonight is John has a presentation prepared, so we're going to let him go through that, and then we'll hold questions, and we'll take all the questions at the end, and then we'll have any other closing business that we want to do. So with that, John, I'm going to hand it over to you, and have fun with it.
All right. Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for coming today and inviting me to speak. I'm assuming everybody can see my screen that I'm sharing here.
Yep.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about AI lending at Upstart. And Chris has given a really good introduction of what Upstart is. I'll go into a little bit of a deeper dive. And so the agenda here is we'll spend just one slide on my background. Chris had mentioned that this might be helpful for those that are a little bit earlier in their career than I am, although I sometimes feel I'm still pretty early in my career, and kind of how I ended up at Upstart. Then we'll transition to what is Upstart, what are Upstart's products, and then probably the most interesting part for this group is a deeper dive into Upstart's underwriting model. And fairness and interpretability will come next. These are sort of hot topics in the machine learning world today, and I'll try to frame them as how they apply in our world of lending. And then, of course, there'll be time for question and answers at the end. But please, if you have questions, feel free to stop me along the way and just ask. I actually prefer if you just unmute yourself. I cannot guarantee that I'm going to see the Zoom chat if you put it in there. Zoom likes to hide things. I try to put it in a place where I could see it, but sometimes Zoom moves it without notice. So I can't guarantee I'll see anything in the chat in a timely manner. So yeah, just unmute and just ask the question. So my background. Math and math education background, Miami University. I taught high school mathematics for a year, but after that, decided that although I did a lot of theoretical mathematics in my studies before teaching high school, I was most interested in my sort of applied statistics classes. And that's why I was interested in pursuing a PhD in statistics. Post PhD, I found a job as a research statistician at a national lab. And this is really, maybe you could have inferred this from the introduction. This is somewhat like an academic environment. It's not really an academic environment. We did a lot of applied problems that were, driven by the business. But a lot of these applied problems ended up producing nascent fundamental research, and they would produce research papers. And so 5 years of that, and then transition to a startup environment like Upstart. So two very different environments here. And I think that the key takeaway is you don't necessarily expect a straight line path in your career. And the other thing is don't underestimate the power of the connections you make. I think like every step on here, there were connections that got me to the next step. For example, I went to graduate school with somebody who recruited me on the machine learning team from Upstart, who ended up recruiting me to come work for Upstart. So this your connections open up doors throughout your career. So that's the, I'm not trying to like talk about how good my background is. I just want you to understand that keep your connections open and don't expect to have a straight line path throughout your career. It's okay to bounce around if those doors open. All right, so let's transition to Upstart. I always forget when they're, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull out all the bullet points. Upstart is an AI lending platform. So I'll talk about this a little bit more, but we're not a lending company per se. We don't fund the vast majority of our loans. What we sell is underwriting, right? And the software and the servicing behind that. Our mission is to enable effortless credit based off of true risk. We're still a pretty young company, under 10 years old, founded in 2012. And we had our IPO about 6 months ago, publicly traded on NASDAQ. 2 offices, San Mateo, the heart of the Silicon Valley, as well as Columbus. So to sort of frame the problem that we're trying to solve and continue to solve every day a little bit better, I'm going to start with a pop quiz. The fact here that I'll give you is that 48% of Americans have access to prime credit. And the multiple choice question is what percentage of Americans have never defaulted on a credit product? And so I actually don't know. I didn't set up a Zoom poll. So why don't we just go ahead and I'll give you a few seconds to type your answer in the chat. All right, I see a variety of answers. 95%, 80 or 95, 80, 25, 80, 25, 80, 80. Wow, maybe some of you have seen this before. A lot of you are getting the right answer. The correct answer is 80. So four out of 5 Americans have never defaulted on a credit product. And what this really says to me is a lot of people are getting credit products, but they don't have prime credit. So they're paying a lot more money than prime borrowers do. But 80% of those people are not defaulting on their loans, right? So the opportunity here is large in the sense that most people are just overpaying for their lending products. And this is really the problem that Upstart, this is why Upstart could exist, so to speak. All right, so that brings us back to our mission. Enable effortless credit based off of true risk. So there's 2 parts to this. Let's focus on the true risk part. Really, I sort of alluded to it, but people pay too much for their lending products, their personal loans, their auto loans, and so forth. And so there's this buffer that lenders add to these products because they're not accurately predicting an individual's true risk. So we want to, in order to do this, we want to try to get a holistic picture of applicants. So we use a combination of what we call non-traditional variables like someone's employment history, as well as traditional data from credit reports, so to speak. And when we're predicting true risk, this is, we usually think of this, it's easiest to think of this as like what's the probability that they'll default on this loan that we might give them? But it also includes additional risk, such as what's the risk this person is fraudulent? What's the risk this person is lying about their income? And so our models are using one income, but they really only have another less income. Effortless. We want to make it as easy as possible. Many of you have probably had a lending product before. Oftentimes it requires you to talk to a lending officer directly. We want to make this process have no more friction than necessary. If someone has to talk to one of our operations personnel, we want to make it as easy as possible, but our goal is to automatically verify people that apply and get approved, so that they don't actually have to interact with anybody during the origination process. So given everything that I've said, it shouldn't come to as a surprise that the machine learning team is instrumental in pursuing this mission and solving this mission. So the true risk part, maybe it's obvious, but we developed the machine learning models behind predicting risk of default, as well as risk of fraud, two things I mentioned. There's another aspect of this, which is fairness reporting. We work with government regulators to ensure that our models are fair from a regulatory perspective. And essentially what this means is in lending and consumer protection, there are certain groups that are protected groups. You can think of gender being one of them, race, age as well. And so we don't want to treat borrowers, for example, of the same credit risk differently because they fall into different groups, different levels of these groups. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes to ensure that our models are fair. Effortless. We have machine learning models behind the verification of our applicants, whether or not this person is fraudulent. Did they steal someone's identity? Is their income close to what they stated on their funding form, for example? Our machine learning models beyond underwriting also are used in our marketing campaigns. So this goes to the effortless part. If someone is out there and they say, oh man, I really need a personal loan for whatever reason, consolidate my credit cards or so forth, we don't want to have them spend a lot of time searching for us. So we want to be able to find those people and directly market it to them.
Hey, John.
Yep.
Since we're allowed to ask questions as we go, I have a question for you. So when Upstart started, was the machine learning component always in the product mix, or was this something that sort of developed over time and through experimentation, and then got added as sort of a core to the products?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. A little bit more of Upstart history. It actually started off in 2012 with the idea that they would offer income sharing agreements. And income sharing agreements are basically agreements for, it's a very small niche market of people early in their careers that agree to take out a loan where they are sort of, they'll pay back some portion of their future income, right? And so the idea here is you have to predict this person's future income. Pretty early on, it was decided that they would transition to personal loans. And I'll talk a little bit about this in the beginning, but to answer your question, yes, the idea of being able to use machine learning to better predict risk in these products, it was at the core of Upstart's mission from the start. But as you'll see in future slides, we didn't have a lot of data in the early days, and so there was a lot of assumptions being made, a lot of you know, wrangling of third-party data and so forth. So,
Awesome.
All right, Upstarts product. So I'd like to take a little bit of time to kind of walk you through our product from the, you know, perspective of a potential borrower. One way to get an Upstart loan is to come to upstart.com. You'll see something like this. You know, you are more than your credit score. You can say check your rate. You pick a reason why you want to get a loan. The default here is pay off credit cards, which is a big one for us. The sign up form, again, this is some of this stuff you'll give to most lenders. Some of this stuff is pretty unique to Upstart. You know, we ask how much you want to borrow, the reason why you want to borrow it, your name, address, and so forth. We also ask about your education and your primary source of income. So these are things that we use that, you know, I see a lot of lenders use source of income, but not necessarily education. And so we would call these non-traditional variables. When somebody fills out the form and they check their rate, if we can offer them the loan, if we can offer them any loan, we'll give them an offer. Behind the scenes, when somebody checks their rate, that's when our underwriting model is running. We collect the data from their funding form. We pull a bunch of third-party data. Those inputs go into our model and we make predictions. The interest rate, which you can think of as the price of the loan, is determined by the predictions of the underwriting model. And then here are the offers. If the borrower chooses to accept one of those offers, then what happens is we have a decision to make, right? When I talked about the effortless part, ideally we would just say, okay, great, give us your bank, you know, they gave us our bank account information, right? And then we could just send them the money. But the other thing is, the other option we have is to verify additional information. So we may when we pull the third-party data and they give us their bank account, we might not be able to automatically verify their income, for example. So our underwriting models assumed one thing, and we're not quite sure if that assumption, for example, about their income is correct. So at that point, they would have to have a conversation with one of our operations personnel, provide additional documentation about their income. And then again, behind the scenes, one last thing I'll say about here is, again, behind the scenes, our underwriting models, our underwriting model already ran. We have other machine learning models, verification models is what we call them, that run to help us make this decision. Okay, post origination. Just like think about a personal loan, user receives the funds, then they have to pay us back. A small proportion won't pay us back, they'll default. Some will become late and we try to get them back on track. And you can kind of see sort of machine or data sciencey type applications come into play here. For example, we're really concerned with how we approach borrowers. What's the most effective way to approach borrowers that like miss a payment, for example, to actually make sure that they make a payment. And again, we have limited resources. So a lot of borrowers just miss a couple days and for whatever reason, and they'll pay us back regardless. But we really want to find those borrowers that essentially would only pay us back if we had direct intervention with them. That was, you know, we can send everybody an email, but we can't call everybody directly. So we want to find the people that would be that our calls would be most effective to. So those are other machine learning projects. So I was showing you the personal loan product. which is actually, in terms of lending, it's actually a relatively small market. And so we've expanded to auto loans. I'm showing you a refinance product here, but we're expanding quickly into the auto market. This is a much larger market compared to personal loans. Most people, at least in the United States, at some point in their life, borrow money to buy a car. And the same sort of process, the same sort of idea applies here. The main difference being that auto loans are secured products, which means we have to take that into account. Default rates on secured products are typically lower. APRs are typically lower because there's a car. Somebody doesn't want to lose their car if they stop paying a loan. Okay, questions before I talk about our personal loan underwriting model?
I have a follow-up question. Yeah, it sounds like you have different machine learning projects, right? Based on what you just shared. Is that one large ML team, or are they teams that are sort of designed to solve a particular problem, like verification versus collection versus marketing? And do you guys keep the technical stack, languages and libraries similar amongst that development kind of process?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, we have the machine learning team. There are various roles, but they're not split up into like the different models. Generally, team members will migrate and work primarily on, say, the verification models, the marketing models, or the underwriting models. But team members have the freedom to move around. Usually, the sort of the thought that we have in our mind is that we'd like people to move around every 6 months or so to make sure that we have a good broad base of knowledge. As far as our tech stack goes, let's see, we generally our models are written in Python, mostly dependent on like scikit-learn, for example. Some of the things I think actually still depend on R, but for the most part, we try to keep things unified into single Python scikit-learn pipelines.
So for this group and people that are sort of attending, that sort of combination is a pretty, I don't want to say standard, but it's a pretty well documented, well sort of archived, that you would not be wrong if you start spending some time making sure that you are up on Python, and scikit-learn is a library you're paying attention to, right?
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. And I'll say I did talk a little bit about my background. Coming from statistics, and even in the environment I was before, I was mostly using R, probably about 90% of the time. And I had used Python in the past. I would say that yes, if you're looking for a place, if you're looking for like a machine learning environment like Upstart, you do want to concentrate on Python. Although if you have a general coding background, it doesn't take a long time to get up to speed. So it sort of depends on your experience level, I would say. So yeah, generally it's just good to have a general good coding background and be comfortable with switching languages if you can, but definitely prioritize Python and scikit-learn. Yeah,
that's awesome. All right, do we have other questions before we move on?
Yeah, can I ask a quick question? So by fraction, out of all the people who miss, I guess at least a single payment, by fraction, what fraction actually need for you guys to follow up?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's very difficult to answer. I don't know the answer off the top of my head. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't give a precise answer to that. Yeah.
All right, no problem. Thank you.
I will say that it's hard because most of, I mean, we have to design experiments to really get at this causal impact. And the sort of the number of different methods you can try is just infinite, right? And so, and also I think the effect size of giving somebody a call or a text are very, very small, right? They're just hard to measure. All right, so it sounds like this group might have some familiarity with underwriting. I've sort of been talking about it as if everybody knows what it is, but let's just go ahead and define it. What is the goal of underwriting? It's basically to predict how likely a borrower is to pay back their loan. And once we make that prediction, we ask the question, can we actually give them a loan? And what is their interest rate if so? Okay. Just to kind of, you know, maybe advertise Upstart a little bit. I think that this is really the main reason why Upstart can exist and continue to be successful. And this is actually a couple years old at this point, but this is an analysis done from a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And they basically found that our models approve 27% more borrowers than traditional models or traditional lenders. And our interest rates are 16% lower for approved loans. And so, you know, these are 2 years old. I would say we've made improvements since then, a large improvement since then. I can't give you exact numbers. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is one of the main government regulatory agencies that is all about consumer protection. And I mentioned fairness earlier. We work closely with the CFPB on fairness issues. So I'll talk a little bit more about our relationship with them in a little while. These next set of slides kind of help answer Chris's earlier question about what did we do early on. When we transitioned to personal loans back in 2014, we didn't have any of our own data, right? We have had a similar problem recently when we started working on auto loans. We didn't have any auto loans that we had originated. So what do? We use third-party data sources. We really had no way to join them together to get row-level data, you know, partial information on different borrowers from different sources. And so they had to make lots of assumptions and guesstimates about the predictions. And I actually wasn't around in 2014 at Upstart, so I don't actually have a great idea what these assumptions were. But you can think of it as, what I do understand is that you can think of it as Ridge's parametric models to predict default probability. As we acquired more data, we started training on our own data. We can have more complex model forms, but we still have this problem where the portfolio is relatively newish. So we are usually originating loans that are 3 years or 5 years in duration, and we have to predict whether or not they'll default anytime in that 3 years or anytime in that 5 years. And if most of our loans originated, say, a year ago, we still have two years of unobserved time in our training data. As we acquire more data, originate more loans, our models just get better because we can be more flexible. We've observed higher percentage of maturity of the loan, and we can make fewer assumptions about the timing of default on times in the loan that we haven't observed much data. Additionally, I'll say that I've been talking about defaults, but we also want to predict prepayments. So prepayments are when somebody prepays their loan, exactly what That's what it sounds like. There's no penalty for this from the borrower's perspective, but from a finance perspective, this is important because while it's better than a default, it does change what's called the present value of the cash flows that we receive. And so when we predict someone's probability of paying back the loan, we use these estimated cash flows to translate into an interest rate. And if they prepay, that estimate of the cash flows is what happened in reality is different from the prediction. And so we actually receive less net present value in the cash flows. So we want to make sure that if people are prepaying, we can predict prepayment as well, so we can get more accurate pricing. Okay, so the machine learning setup is fairly standard. We have tabular data, and so you can think of our inputs as an m-dimensional vector, and this corresponds to the borrower's information at the time that they apply for the loan. For example, their credit score, their income, the number of open trade accounts that they've had in the past, things like that, and various transformations of these features. I've listed a few more here: educational info, job info, digital signals, like, you know, did they click on a Upstart ad from Google or Facebook or something like that. So we can say in borrowers in total. For each borrower, the outcome variable is you can be in basically you can be in one of three states. It's slightly more complicated than this, but just for simplicity, you could have fully repaid your loan. That's a good thing. And assuming that we've observed the entire, say, 3-year maturity period and they made all their payments on time. They could have defaulted at some point in that time. That's bad. Or the loan is current. They're still in prepayment, or they're still in payment period. So far, so good. Okay. And so what we have here is classic right-censored data. We care about the timing of defaults, but as I mentioned, many loans have not matured. And the question is, will they default in the future? So somebody in that third category that's so far so good, we actually don't know what's going to happen in the future. So this is right-censored data, and we take a survival analysis approach to the problem. We're interested in estimating the survival function, which is the probability that default does not occur before time t, and the corresponding hazard function, which is the default rate conditional on survival until time t. And for those of you with survival analysis, a background from the early statistical literature, you might be thinking Cox proportional hazards models or Weibull models or things of that nature. These typically make strong parametric assumptions about these survival functions or equivalently hazard functions. And these were really developed in applications where you didn't have as much data as what we have now, right? They were industrial applications. Think like, I want to know, like, I'm an appliance company, I'm making some kitchen appliance, and I want to know how many times this is going to run so I can estimate some warranty on this product, right? And the thing is that they actually have to build this appliance and then they have to run it through tests. And so it's actually very expensive. Every data point that they get is actually very, very expensive. And so they can't actually just do a million of these things, right? In our world, we have a lot more data, and that gives us a lot more flexibility, so we don't have to make these strong parametric assumptions. Any interesting machine learning problem makes predictions, usually predictions into the future. We train on data that we've seen, and we want to predict on a new applicant that comes into the future, that applies for a loan at some point in the future. But in finance, economic conditions change rapidly. We all noticed this a year ago when COVID hit and people started losing their jobs, or at least being furloughed from their jobs. So rapid economic changes. Questions here are how can we actually adjust our model predictions to account for these sudden changes? We know that our training data, our loans were originated at a time under different economic conditions than in the future, right? And so anytime you know that in advance, you want to make smart adjustments to your predictions to adjust for things that are just not in your training data, like future economic conditions. The other thing is our training data are on loans that we approved in the past, so they contain a certain, credit level, for example, right? But we're constantly worried about extending credit to more and more people, especially people that just don't have credit histories. All these thin file people, traditional credit bureaus just don't have any history on them. They don't have traditional credit scores. We're constantly worried about how do we actually make accurate predictions on this people. It's really part of our mission. True risk, right? Just because you don't have a long credit history doesn't mean you're a risky borrower. So we need to, again, this is extrapolation, right? We're extrapolating into the future. We're also extrapolating, say, into credit scores that we've never seen before. And how do we do this? And how do we make iterative adjustments and iterative improvements in these areas? So these are some of the challenges we try to tackle every day. And I've sort of mentioned a lot of this here. I mentioned that we train on loans that we approved. This is actually sampling selection bias, right? They were approved in the past. Yep, data seen at production is different than the training data. Yep. Yeah, so all these points I just said on the last slide. So. Okay, questions before talking about fairness and interpretability?
I have a question for you. So when you look at training models over large data sets that were captured at a period of time, like you discussed, and then an underlying shift in the economics happens, right? So if I took 10 years of financial data, ran models against those 10 years, but those 10 years were 1960 to 1970, the predictability of a model that was running from 1990 to 2000 would be drastically different, right? So many things have changed in that. How did you guys sort of approach that fundamental shift in, hey, a pandemic takes, a toll on the global economic, sort of stage? Is it, are they sort of gross levers where you're just like turning down large sections of data? Did you synthesize data to sort of model? So what was that approach like mentally?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. What I'll say is, so we have continuous monitoring of our data, and a lot of times these adjustments are designed to be sort of conservative adjustments from the investor's perspective. By investor, I don't know if I did mention that we don't actually provide the funding for most of our loans. Our bank partners do, and so the investors are the bank partners. And So these adjustments are sort of conservative from that standpoint. And we monitor our performance on basically on a monthly basis. But I'll say when COVID hit, there were drastic reactions across the finance industry about origination of loans. No one really, investors hate uncertainty, and so we don't want to originate loans now. So that's one lever to pull, just stop originating loans. Another lever to pull are hardship plans. So investors can sometimes be flexible on loan modifications for the loans on their book to try to, when people temporarily lost their jobs, they couldn't make their payments. And so there were loan modifications that were put in place. But yeah, I mean, I say what we use a lot of times are sort of to adjust our models are sort of predictions of the future about the current state of economics. And I think the best thing that you can do is to make these adjustments iteratively and continuously, because we can't predict that far into the future very well. We all know that, especially when it comes to the economy. And so we constantly update our models and update our adjustments.
Gotcha. And I do note that in the chat, Catherine has posted a link to the performance for your COVID report. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were. We view this as a sort of like a real data point. A lot of investors have been. I think they continue to be skeptical. Some are coming on, more and more are coming on board. This offers actually a real data point on how we perform in a real economic crisis, so to speak. Because it's usually when you think about the time that Upstart was founded to basically right before COVID, economic conditions were really good, and that's relatively, and that's where all our training data came from. And so the question was, oh yeah, you can do great in good times, but how do you do in bad times? So yeah,
that's great.
Yeah. All right, fairness and interpretability. We're about 15 minutes left, so this should only take about 5 minutes. I mentioned that we care a great deal about fairness of our models. There's a huge concern with across applications of AI about how AI models or machine learning models make decisions, and are they making them fairly? And in the world of finance, as I said before, this basically means we don't want to treat people of different groups differently if they have the same credit risk. Although that definition that I said is one of the definitions of fairness, and researchers really don't, and it wasn't really precise. There's precise mathematical definitions of these, but researchers really have no single definition. There are actually multiple, and they're not all simultaneously achievable, sort of based on probability theory. And if one condition exists, then another condition can't exist, right? And so I alluded that we work closely with regulators to assess the impact of our models on unprotected groups. So basically the idea here is we take predictions from our models, as well as information we receive from regulators about which class these applicants belong to. For example, are they female, are they male, are they above 62? What race are they? We don't actually collect a lot of this information, and we can't legally use it in our models, but we get this information from our regulators, CFPB. And we do tests on our predictions to make sure that we're not, we've agreed on definitions of fairness with the CFPB, and we continually test these on a quarterly and yearly basis and report to the CFPB the outcomes of these tests. We also share with them quite a bit about our model, and if we make changes to our model, we also, not all changes are reportable, but significant changes are, and so we actually report to them about changes in our model as well. And so we have what's called a no action letter. And essentially what this means is that we are abiding by the the CFPB concludes that we are abiding by the regulations. And then as long as we continue to abide by the stipulations in the no action letter, we are demonstrating that we are fair from the CFPB's perspective. This is actually something you can search for online. There's a link here. And you can go ahead and read it. It kind of outlines what we do on a quarterly and yearly basis. Closely related to that is interpretability, another kind of, and I'll just point out that Catherine linked the no action letter in the chat. Thanks, Catherine. Related to interpretability or fairness is interpretability, another kind of hot topic in machine learning. Why does the machine learning model make a prediction, right? And so one thing that's unique to, I guess it's unique to lending is that when you deny somebody who applies for a loan in any loan product, if you deny them, you have to provide what's called an adverse action notice. And what this is essentially what this is supposed to be is just an explanation of why you couldn't offer the lending product to them, right? In traditional underwriting, this can be really easy, right? Oh, your debt to income was too high. We can't lend to you. Your FICO score, your credit score was too low. We don't lend to people with low FICO scores. In our case, we have thousands of variables that go into an underwriting model, and they're trained on data. They're accurate. We know they are, but how do you explain that? So that's the question we try to answer. So how do we generate an AAN from a complex, nonlinear machine learning prediction system? And so this is really one of the areas, as well as fairness, that we do what I would classify as academic research, right? We dig into the literature. We do literature searches. We try to we have group meetings that people can come to and discuss the literature, talk about ideas. We haven't published anything from our group yet, but there has been talk. It's sort of like, anybody that's published papers, you know how difficult it can be and how much time it takes. So I think that's probably one of the main factors why we haven't put anything out in the literature, because we have other day jobs, but we do dig into the literature quite a bit and kind of debate the merits of different fairness techniques as well as interpretability techniques. Okay, that's all I have for the machine learning model and the underwriting. I will say that we are hiring. We've been hiring for quite some time. On the machine learning team, we have what we call research scientists, data scientists, and machine learning engineers. Really quick, research scientists are really closely tied to our underwriting models and our other machine learning models, trying to improve them. Data scientists are tied to business questions and trying to answer questions about the business, say, trying to understand conversion rates being, people that apply, what's the likelihood that they'll actually accept a loan and fund a loan. They are, building dashboards to understand model metrics over time and monitor our models and things like that. Our machine learning engineers are they're machine learners and software engineers. I sort of think of them as both machine learners and software engineers. So they tackle problems that are unique to software engineering, or they tackle software engineering problems that are unique to machine learning, right? Like, our data is changing. How do we improve the efficiency and what we train our models and do research on our model? And then we also have software engineers as well. So Yep, we also have internships we're hiring for and for the fall. And here's some contact information. Catherine is online. I don't know if Alicia is online, but I saw Catherine was here. And some contact information. So.
That is excellent. So, oh, go ahead.
Yep, that's all I have. This is just our locations. I mentioned San Mateo. In Columbus, we're down in the short north. We have this entire building now, as far as I understand. I will say that we just decided to go to a what do we call it, digital first model, where pretty much everyone has the decision of how often they come in the office, with some stipulations. I don't think there's a need to go into the details here, but we're very flexible in terms of where you work.
That's excellent.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have 6 minutes left. Let's open it to any questions that anyone has. Go ahead, if you want, turn on your camera and unmute, and then go ahead and ask John a question. Unless turning on the camera is the issue for not asking the question, then don't turn on the camera.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Yep.
Yeah, so again, thanks. This was really informative. I was just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how you guys decide on the weight, how you guys weight the data on the current loans, right? The stuff that hasn't been finished yet. Is the weighting is also optimized separately, or is it just thrown into a large decision tree altogether?
Yeah, that's a good question. We take a survival analysis approach, and basically the targets are depend on whether or not the data is the observation is censored or not. And by censored, I mean a loan that hasn't matured but is paid on, basically paid up to that point. And so we take that into account in our model as a survival analysis model would. We take the censoring into account. So it's you can kind of think of it as a partially observed, where we just don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future on this loan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also have another quick question. So when you ask about the educational info, is it like maybe by law restricted only for like very generic, like school degree year, that sort of stuff, or can you actually ask people about their grades or GPA, that sort of stuff?
Oh, I actually don't know the regulations about asking more information. Currently, we typically just ask, what did they major in? Where did they go to school? When did they graduate? Sort of thing. And we also have to, I will say, we have to be careful about how we use this information, right? Because going back to fairness, right? We're concerned with how we use education variables so that we don't unfairly treat people just because of where they went to school, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Another question. Camera and mic aren't working, but this is a question. What do you think is the biggest challenge for Upstart over the next 5 years, John?
Oh, wow. Yeah, so maybe some other Upstarters can chime in as well, but I would say the biggest challenges are staying ahead of our competitors and opening up new product spaces such as auto. We have shown that we can succeed in the personal loan world, and we are in the nascent. Our auto product is nascent, and one of the biggest challenges is succeeding in that market, and showing that we can succeed in multiple products. And I would say in the course of 5 years, I would predict that we would have 3 to 4 new products by then as well. So continuing to grow our product space and staying ahead of our competitors.
Awesome.
Mhm.
All right, we are taking it right up to 6:59. So with that, I'd really like to thank you for coming out and talking to us, John. The presentation was great. I liked the interaction, and yeah, you're always welcome back. For everyone else, Katie will be sending out information on the next event and what we can expect there, and hope to see everyone online.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.